I want to welcome everybody to tonight's edition of A Conversation with Brian. Tonight's guest, Greg Bozman. Greg and I have competed against each other in basketball since our teen years, and his incredible and somewhat challenging life's journey, which took him from the storied basketball powerhouse of Crisfield High School on Maryland's Eastern Shore to Fort Union Military Academy, to the University of Georgia, to West Virginia University, to Roanoke College, and back to the Eastern Shore, to the Eastern Shore Correctional Institute, where he worked as a corrections officer, to his current profession as an educator, coach, and athletic director. Greg's story was featured in Mitchell Northam's new book, High School Basketball on Maryland's Eastern Shore, A Shore Hoops History. We're going to have a really good conversation tonight, and I hope you all sit down and just get your popcorn, because you might smile a lot, you might laugh, you might have some tears, but we're going to really dig into Greg's story and his amazing journey. And so without further ado, we'd like to welcome Greg Bozman to A Conversation with Brian. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Hey, it's funny because, we've known each other for 40 something years, right? And we've literally never had a conversation.
No, we haven't. And it's a shame.
It's funny. We played against each other. We recently have gotten in touch through Facebook and through texting, and I've just grown to admire, the heck out of you. And I always, thought about, when you were playing at Crisfield, and I'm going to give our audience some context, and then we'll jump into our session today. But when Greg was in high school, he transferred from Washington High School to Crisfield, and I was going into my sophomore year, and Crisfield was always stacked. Always stacked, state championship after state championship. And I had finished my freshman year and I did okay. But going into my sophomore year, and I saw that Greg was transferring into Crisfield, and I was like, oh my God, they got Kenny Evans. Now they got this 6'8" guy who can do everything. He can handle the ball, he can shoot. He was ahead of his time. And I really, I appreciate the times playing against you and Kenny and Crisfield. And then we kind of, went different ways, and you went and played college basketball in a number of different places, us ending up in the Atlantic 10 very briefly together, you at West Virginia and me at GW. But your story is fascinating. One of the things that led me to wanting me to have you on the show was this book. When I read Mitchell Northam's High School Basketball on Maryland's Eastern Shore, A Shore Hoops History, and I turned to the lessons of Greg Bozman, and I started reading your story, and it really just made me connect to some of the Facebook posts you've had over the years, and just the humility with which you live life and how you give back. And so I'm going to start, Greg, just with this quote, and I just want you to talk to it from Mitchell's book. You don't belong here. Man, you don't belong here either. This exchange between two former Division I college basketball players happened in the late 80s, but it didn't come in a park, on a hardwood court, or in a gym. It took place on the campus of the Eastern Correctional Institute, a medium security men's prison in Westover, Maryland, then the largest of its kind in the state. It opened in 1987 and created many jobs for Eastern Shore natives looking for work. Folks like Greg Bozman, who landed a gig there as a correction officer. Greg, in our opening, you might not have noticed it, or you may have noticed it, and our audience may have noticed it. There is a clip from a wonderful basketball player named Skip Wise. Connect the dots for me.
Well, my brother was a counselor. We actually started together. He was a counselor, and I was starting as a correctional officer. And we started work in February, and had to go through the academy. When we got through the academy, they actually started bringing in inmates for the west side. The east side was full, so the west side of ECI was starting to open up.
Right.
And he was counselor in Housing Unit 1, course, my brother, he's much like you, me, and Paul. He loved basketball. That was
Yeah.
what he lived. He came home one evening and he said, "Man, you won't believe who's on my caseload." And I said, "Who?" He said, "Skip Wise." I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "I'm telling you, I'm his counselor in House Unit 1." So Bruce, again, wanting to play ball, went to the warden and got permission from the warden for us to play basketball against what was with the varsity team on the west side every day. So we played 7 days a week in jail from 4 to 6 against these inmates. And what talent was in there? I mean,
Yeah.
Brian, listen, you're a great player. Probably one of the best high school players ever on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and went on to have a great college career. I could play, but Skip was
Oh,
he
hey.
was he
Yeah.
was he was an NBA player,
Yeah.
and it was sad. And we played against each other so much. And that particular day when that conversation took place, I said, "Skip, you don't belong to be here. You should be in the NBA. We should
Right.
be at the tail end of your career, possibly a Hall of Fame career." And he kind of looked at me and he said, "You don't belong here either." And that was just the admiration of us playing together
Sure.
all those days. He respected my talent, and of course I respected his.
Game respects game, right?
Sir.
And just thinking about that, and in the book it talks about when he said that, it really kind of gave you a kind of a spark turn in terms of, where should my life be going? Let's go back a little bit, because I mean that's kind of the middle part of your journey. Let's go back to your time with Chrisfield and then your time with Fort Union, because I know Coach Eric was a huge influence over you. Talk about your journey in terms of, when you left, when you played at Chrisfield and then you decided to go to Fort Union. Talk about that in terms of your basketball, your career, and then talk about the journey that took you to different places and really was part of your life story that became it's who you became, right? And
Yeah,
so talk a
I
little
re-
bit about that.
yeah, in the 10th grade, and I'm gonna tell a little story on myself.
Sure.
High school, I'm 6'4.5", and I'm a guard. But and I know back then, if you're 6'4.5" and you're in the Bayside, you're going to
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
So I had a great coach, Larry Sterling, who put me, in the post. I actually, the 10th grade, I flunked off the team. So I was, cutting up a little bit in school, not doing what
Right.
I was. So I lost that year. My junior year, we started off really strong. Had some talent, a lot of talent on the Washington team. But again, I'm playing a position that kind of really hurt my confidence more than anything,
Yeah.
because I was a face the basket guy. So I got a little frustrated. I quit 16 games into that season and left the team and decided to transfer to Chrisfield. My grandparents lived in Chrisfield, so they
Right.
became for my senior year. And I did what was unheard of. You didn't go from Washington High to
Yeah.
Chrisfield or
That's
Washington.
that's a rival. That's like me going from Wahide to Bennett.
I lost. I didn't lose, but there were some friends that were very upset with me.
Yeah.
It's I get invited to both class reunions, so it's all mended. But
Yeah.
at the time, it was not what you wanted to
Yeah.
do. So Mr. Kane, Coach Kane, let me face the basket a little more. You talked about Kenny. I mean, Kenny was just an unbelievable high school player.
Player. Yeah.
And when we were on and we were hitting, we were a pretty tough team that year. But I think me going there somewhat kind of disrupted the continuity of the team, because I was the guy coming in from Washington, and we had a real strong regional. We almost made it to the states, lost by
Yeah.
2.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, but we had some great moments that year. But I knew, one, because I felt like my whole high school career, I kind of had played out of position and not really shown what I could do.
And
Um,
before you go on, Greg, for those who don't know, about Greg, you seriously, you were before your time, really. I mean, if you had played today, you'd be like a pro, because
yeah,
6'6", 6'7", 6'8", that's Kevin Durant, and that's how you played.
right. Back then, if you played like that, you got ridiculed.
Yep.
Playgrounds a lot of times, like, and I'll go talk later about men's league teams when we could finally form our own teams and play the way we wanted to play,
Right.
and started beating guys that beat us in high school. just because we were allowed to, finally be ourselves. My brother,
Sure.
same way. So, I went to Fork Union. I actually saw Fork Union Military Academy, kids going left and right in Street and Smith basketball magazine. And the name, actually, Fork Union Military Academy, kind of caught my
Sure.
attention. So I wrote a letter. I had Coach Kane write a letter, and Coach Fletcher Arrett, had me come down and try out. And we played, Brian, I tell you, we played 3-4 hours straight. I mean, I thought I was going to die. They were in, and he was actually so impressed with my brother. He wanted him too, but Bruce had already played some at Salisbury
Yeah.
State. He couldn't go back and prep.
Yeah.
And he chose me. He called me up about a week later and said, you're going to be on my 12-man roster next year.
So when I found out you were going to Fork Union, because I had gone to a number of basketball camps and played against Kenny Smith and Pearl and all the other guys, but there were a lot of guys who were going to Fork Union who were just beasts. And I was like, when I saw that Greg was going to Fork Union, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to go big time.
Well, when I got there, I knew right away these guys could play. I mean, we had guys getting recruited by North Carolina, Maryland,
Yeah,
big time schools when I arrived. And so we started playing pickup ball. And at first I'm like, man, this is no joke, because you take a trip off. You know how it is. A Division One guys, 9 of us were Division One basketball players. So if you don't play defense, you're going to get embarrassed.
Yeah.
So I ended up guarding Keith Colbert from Annapolis, Maryland. He ended up playing at Virginia Tech, and he was quite a player.
Yep.
So you got better. Every day you got better playing against competition, and that's pretty much what happened with me. And I also had probably one of the greatest coaches, basketball minds, and human I've ever been around, and Coach Arrett.
Yeah, rest his soul. I know he passed away last year.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was an amazing man. Like I said it one time before when I was being interviewed, that if your parents, of course, are your always go to,
Sure.
and my big part of my life. But if you can meet an individual like that, comes into your life and can guide you and show you the right things to do, you're blessed. And I was blessed to have him.
And so through, again, through the next stage to going to Georgia and West Virginia, and talk about that. Did you keep in touch with Coach Arrett through those times? Because I think that's the anchor that people need when they're going through these rocky shores, these rocky pieces.
All the time. He was disappointed in me, but he also understood, coming from the Eastern Shore and how we're all real close knit down here.
Yeah.
Sometimes we run home because home is a safe haven.
Yeah.
He never criticized me, but he told me one time in front of Amrit Rayfield, Coach Rayfield, son, I had taken him down there to try out. He said, you should have been a pro basketball player.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like putting your head down. You're thinking, but he was always there for me. I could call him. Like I said, he was disappointed sometimes, but he never turned his back. He was always there to talk.
Yeah.
Great man.
So you go to Georgia, and you don't stay long, but in the book you talk about one regret, because that Georgia team was huge. They went to the Final Four.
I went down there, and I'll be honest with you, that summer I didn't, I left Fork Union. So, you're getting notoriety that you're signed with a Division I school. You're in the paper, and your head was a little big, and I didn't prepare for the rigors of what it was going to be when I got there. So I had some good moments. I don't think I was the type of player that Hugh Durham wanted. Used to some guys being a little rugged and banging down low, and I was more of a perimeter player. But they went on to the Final Four, and that probably is my biggest regret, because I should have been on that team.
Yeah, and then you come home, but then Gail Catlett, has you come to West Virginia, and I don't know if you remember this, and it's vaguely in my head, but there was a game where we played against each other, and for some reason I was in a car and you were in a car, and we kind of passed each other and we waved or something. You remember that?
I do. We were going back to school. I guess you were going to GW and I was
going.
We were set to play each other, I think within a week's time. you don't get much of a break when
Oh,
season's going on.
yeah,
And so neat because we kind of passed each other, and my
yeah,
brother car with me, and he was like, "This is pretty cool." Two kids from the shore playing Division I basketball,
yeah,
and families are waving. Your family's always been so warm and welcome everywhere you go. Your dad, God rest his soul, he was. You're just great people. You
yeah.
know what I mean? But they had big smiles on their face, and that was a neat moment.
Yeah, I didn't know if you remember that, but I remember that, and I'm like, again, it's funny because these 15 minutes is the most we've ever spoken to each other.
Exactly.
And we played against each other. You sent me that clip of when we played, and we were on an all tournament team at the boys club, Salvation Army Boys Club back then. Now it's the Boys and Girls Club. And we've been in the paper together and played against each other, but again, life is funny and it takes you on a interesting journey. But I am so blessed and fortunate that we've connected because I feel like I know you really well. And just through the things that you do and how you're just a great role model and how you live your life, it just is so impressive. And again, in the book you talk about, everybody has tough times. It's just how you respond to it.
It is. I've had a lot of setbacks. I mean, I talked to you briefly about um, why I left West Virginia, but with my mom being ill,
Yeah.
and that was hard. I mean, you're 19 years old, and you should be staying in school, but your mom's sick, and you want to be home with her. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, some things to me at the time were much more important than basketball or my future.
You know,
So
Greg, one of the things that I always, just think about is, you know, when you say there's certain regrets in terms of the Final Four, I don't look at it that way. I just look at it that as just part of your story. You wouldn't be who you are today without those challenges and those pieces that were maybe um, not the way you want them to go, but you're able to tell your story to so many kids, so hopefully can prevent them from making some mistakes, but also to help them understand that they're going to all go through hard times in life. Life is not going to be easy for anybody.
no, not at all. I mean, if other than my family, my wife, my kids, my grandchildren, and of course my parents and my brother when they were alive, grandparents when they were living, nothing, and I say, of God, of course, because you believe in a greater being, but
Sure.
it was more important to me than that round ball. Like
Yeah.
it consumed me. And I tell kids all the time now, if I love something as much as I love that, and I kind of made mistakes and messed that up, we're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Show you. I mean, that's who would ever thought that I would walk away from basketball,
Yeah.
you know, and you got to learn how to deal with that. And what I've done through those mistakes is try to share that with the students that I've worked with over the years, and tell them, look, we're not perfect. We're going to have ups. We're going to have downs.
Yeah.
Big thing I tell them all the time: you're never going to be on top all the time,
Yep.
and you're never going to be on bottom all the time. So it's how you handle each situation is the true test of any man, I think.
Yeah. It's funny because I think we always, or I shouldn't say always, but there are times where we think the grass is greener on the other side. And I although again, I humbly say I was a pretty good basketball player in high school. And I was very fortunate because just like Bruce with you, I had an older brother, Paul, who when I would play against Paul and the older guys, and I was able to just hone my game because I was always playing against older guys. But one of the things that I found when I got to GW, as you just kind of alluded to, was that everybody was good.
Oh yeah.
But everybody was good. And so, coming from the Eastern Shore where, I might have been, pretty, recognized, it was still difficult because I didn't play very much my first 2 years. I was just like, there was a lot of DNPs on my screen, on my stat sheet, did not play. And my first year, I wanted to quit. I don't know if people knew this, but I wanted to come home. But my parents were like, just stick it out. But it really was very challenging, and it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me because again, you got a big head because you think you're going in and you're going to be a star, and
Right.
everybody was a star in their high schools.
Yeah. I admired you because you stuck it out. You know what I mean? But I think you much like me in a way, but somewhat different. Your Bayside career, you were a big kid playing Bayside basketball, and I think if you had maybe at a young age worked on guard skills
Yeah. Yep.
initially,
Yep.
it had.
And that's the thing, because Coach Waller, I appreciate him putting me at guard my senior year, but I didn't have guard skills. And so when I went to GW, it was like I'm playing against all these guys from New York City, Newark, Philly, and they are all playing guard when they were, in, middle school, and they were 6'3", 6'4". And
Yeah,
so it took me some time to catch up to be
right.
able to do that. And then I had a coach who was, Jerry Gimmelstab. He's passed away now. He was a former assistant from Bobby Knight, and he was all about defense. You had to play defense. You had to be hard nosed. And I would play defense and never get in the game. And so we got a coach, John Keister, who was, from North Carolina, and he's like, I want people to score. And so I just, for my sophomore year, I just practiced on 3-point shooting because the 3-point shot was coming in. And so I knew I would get in the game if I could just shoot the three.
Yeah, you were way better than me in high school. There was no question about that. But
Yeah, I think
I
it
would
turned around afterwards because you just,
I don't even know that. I just feel like, like I said, if we had lived in a different area, I can't
yeah,
my situation, maybe if I'd come up 20, 25 years later, I would have been a perfect fit for the game, especially today's game. And I think in your case, if you had grew up in New York where
yeah,
you were a guard in middle school, no
yeah,
matter, you're 6'3", 6'4", you're still playing guard.
yeah.
Who knows what would have happened? And I said the same thing about Jerry Carter. You remember Jerry Carter?
Mhm.
He was the
Yeah.
same player, great player. But I think if somebody had really honed his ball handling skills at an early age, I mean, the sky would have been the limit for him also.
Yeah. Let's go to, after you left West Virginia, you went to Roanoke and you hurt your foot, and then you kind of went back home, and that's where I started with that quote where you went to the Eastern Shore Correctional Institute. Once you left there, and you talked about going back to Chrisfield and starting to coach. Talk about your coaching career, because you have had a great coaching career, and I'm not talking about wins and losses. I'm talking about the people, the young people, girls and boys, because you've coached girls and boys, the people that you affect. Talk about that experience for you as a coach, as a teacher, because I think the coaches are the greatest teachers.
Right. When I left Roanoke, that was a rough situation for me because it started so well, and then I had hurt my foot early on, and I knew it was broke. And
You were a D3 preseason All-American.
yeah, I had preseason. That's what they were predicting. In my
Yeah,
first game, big article, Maroons have found Star and Bosman, but
yeah,
I, Brian, and I haven't shared this with many people, but I was kind of addicted to some pain pills back then. I actually missed the game against Catholic University because I didn't get up,
yeah, yeah,
get me up. And, it was bad at the end. I regret that, but the things you do to play, and I knew that was my last opportunity to
yeah.
play, but I probably 40% of what I could do that year because of my injury. And it was heartbreaking, really.
And that's why I think I admire you so much, Greg, is because again, we all have had struggles. I've talked, in my podcast, about my struggles with mental health, when I was younger, and right after I finished playing ball in Europe, and so, but we're human beings, and I think men sometimes don't open up and share because we think we're supposed to be tough and strong, but when we do this, we're allowing somebody else to be like, oh, somebody else is going through this or has been through this, and it's okay for me to be weak sometimes and ask for help.
Yeah, and I use that sometimes. I tell them, I said I was addicted. I understand how people become addicted
Yeah,
because I wanted to play basketball. Of course, I was like a zombie out there, but
yeah,
I had to do what I had to do to fight the pain. And something that I share with the kids. This was a time in my life where I wanted something bad enough that I did something that I shouldn't have been doing to continue it, and backfired on me because I ended up both my feet were broken at the
wow,
end of, and that's how it ended. And I just never went back. From there, you come home to the Eastern Shore. I'm at the gym all the time at Chrisfield High School playing pickup ball. We had a very competitive, like semi-pro summer league down there. So I was a fixture, playing ball. And I ended up wanting to come back to the shore to prove to everybody, you didn't have to do that, because everybody knew Brian Butler was the star high school player. In my case, I was a good high school player, but my upside was, so I spent a lot of my life, with trying to prove,
like chip on your shoulder. Yeah.
And I was very competitive in men's leagues, but Coach Phil Rayfield would always let me in the gym. He was a teacher at Chrisfield,
right,
because you got a kid that's played college basketball.
Yeah.
Everybody about me, so I could help the kids. And that's when I started really sharing my story with them.
That's instant credibility. Division
Yeah.
One. Somebody hears Division One, that's instant credibility.
Yeah, they look at you and you're like, oh, that's Brian Butler, that's Greg Bozman. They played college basketball, so that was my end. And then in 1989, actually it was 1990, the spring of 1990, we were playing, and Coach Rayfield got called into the hallway by the principal at the time. And when he came back in, he says, would you like to be my assistant coach next year? They've just offered me the head coaching job at Chrisfield. And I was like, absolutely. My dream, because my plan, probably like yours, I wanted to play high school, college, try to play pro somewhere, and home and teach and coach.
And so, what is coaching like for you? It's the other side. And you as a player, me as a player, we have a lot of control over things. And you as a coach, you get all different types of players, types of personalities, and you have to help them become a team.
Well, I ran conditioning along with being the bench coach the first 2 years. My conditioning was like a drill sergeant. If you ask any boys basketball player from 1990 to into the 2000s, including Andre, how my conditioning was, they're like crazy. I mean, I'd come, but I found myself in one year, I think it was like maybe 96 or 97. Coach Rayfield comes in the gym and he said, Boz, come here for a second. He said, you have got to chill out a little bit, because these kids, they're getting ready to fall out. You know what I mean? But I was so geared to that college.
Yeah.
And then, and like you said, you get different talents. You get kids that, are playing just to play. They don't love the game.
Yeah.
So you adapt to the athlete and the player that you have.
What's the difference between coaching boys and girls? Or is there a difference?
Oh, it's a big difference. When I started, with Mr. Rayfield in 99, he said, look, we need a girls coach here. Every year, Chrisfield was a doormat of the conference. I mean, their girls basketball program, I think, went 2 stretches where they didn't win a game in like 7 and 8 years.
Wow.
And he was like, why don't you try it? And I'm like, Coach, look, I am not going to coach girls basketball. He said, I'm telling you, he did it before he started with the boys. And he said,
right,
try, so I said, okay. My first year, I'm turning 37 years old, and we go 0-23. And I mean, we're getting beat, Brian, 70-13.
Wow.
85. And so,
so what is your mindset then, Greg? Because you're used to winning and playing at a high level. What is your mindset then? Is it more, building relationships, building resiliency, teaching life lessons, and also teaching the skills? Or is it, we just need to get a little bit better, just even if it's not by winning, just to show that they're improving?
If honestly, if I had been 27, I would have never coached girls basketball. But at 37, and had experience, what we did, we said, okay, they beat us 80-10 the first game at 70 points. We're gonna cut that in half.
Okay. Yeah.
35 the next time we faced them. And it didn't, it seems like still a lot of points,
but that's a little big. Those are victories. And
Coach Kane came to my last game at the Civic Center. They were playing all the playoff games at the Civic Center at the time. Right. And we lose, I think we played fairly well. We only lose by about 17. I think it was the Colonel Richardson. And Coach Kane comes over to me. So you are going to be a great coach. I said, Coach Kane, I'm 0-23. he said, you coached from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And it didn't matter if you were, how far you were down or how things were going, you were still teaching and you were coaching. So honestly, from 99 to 2002, 2003, greatest, by far, the greatest 5 years of my life and dealing with basketball.
Really?
Just in that program around the last 2 years, we were in a regional final, 2 years in a row. And it just the relationships we built, the teaching that it was, I'll never forget those 5 years.
And I bet you some of those girls who are now women still, think fondly back at that time and maybe even keep in touch with you because of what they experienced with you.
I'm friends with every one of them on Facebook. They've all become successful. We got a doctor in physical therapy. We've got career military. I mean, it's just amazing how successful those young ladies have been. And they're like my daughters, you know what I mean? I still keep up with them and check on them. They don't even know I'm checking on them, but I'll peek page, make sure things are okay. But it was a great experience. I'm hoping that, some of the things I did, for them at the time helped them through life, but they helped me. I helped them.
Hey, you're just talking about that idea of that experience helping them later on in life. I think for a lot of basketball players, and especially when we were coming up on the shore, I think some of us had it backwards. Some of us, let basketball use us instead of having us use basketball as a vehicle. And I think at times I think I let basketball use me, but I really start to think about, I'm not that good. I ain't going to the NBA. I better start thinking about, what's next. And especially when I played in Europe and then I hurt my knee, I was like, okay, how can I use basketball and my experience as a vehicle to get better and better and to, do the things that I want to do outside of basketball?
Correct. It was my son was like that. He was a very good high school player. And he didn't go to like where he wanted to go.
Right.
I told him, you don't understand. You don't have to play Division I. You can play Division III, NAI.
Yeah.
It's what that provides you. The lessons that's going to provide you, the doors that open. I mean, it opened doors for you, later on in your career, because you came home, and I'm sure it was the same thing. Hey, this guy played pro basketball.
Yeah.
Let's hear what he's got to say. So you're always using those things as a tool. And you're right. I think basketball, a lot of coaches don't push that. Let it be a life lesson for you, and things, you can share with kids and students and help them through their problems.
Yeah, it's a microcosm of life. I mean,
It
when
is.
you talk about basketball, the sport, what happens during a game, the ups and downs, what you have to do to prepare for that game through practice, not getting along with people, but having to, work with people who you might not like on your team. It's such a great vehicle to allow for, no matter who you are on the team. If you're, quote, the number 1 person or the, quote, the number 15 person, every person has to do their job for this team to gel, to move as one.
Right. Yeah, it definitely, I mean, you look at Curry, he's probably the greatest shooter.
Yeah.
He goes 0 for 9 the other night. Doesn't make a 3 the whole game.
Yep.
I mean, and he's the greatest. He's the greatest shooter probably ever in the NBA. He has to deal with that. He has to keep playing, make nice passes, go to the basket, fight through that adversity. So it's a teaching tool. All sports are, but where we played basketball, that it's taught me a lot of life lessons.
Yeah, Greg, one of the things that people don't realize is that we fail much more in basketball than we are successful. If you and I are shooting 42% from the 3-point line, that's great.
Right.
But we're missing 58% of our shots.
Exactly.
We're missing more than half of our shots. And so you have to keep going and say, I'm going to get back up, because I have to have that confidence, that belief that I'm going to make it.
Right.
And so it's just like life, right?
Exactly. I mean, how many times you had some struggles that that you've spoken about in your life, and God knows I have. There's been times, when you got to fight through it. You get up and things just aren't going your way. Life's rough. Things are happening. People are ill. You're losing family members, and you have to be strong and get through those things.
Yeah.
And of course, back teaches you that. It teaches you to fight through adversity.
Speaking of, tough times and adversity, you posted something on Facebook, and I think it's just like the most fantastic tribute to, a family member. You created a court for your brother Bruce.
Oh, you're gonna have me crying in front of all.
It's amazing. I mean, when I saw that, that's amazing.
My brother, for me, was he was my hero. I admired him, not just basketball wise, but he was music. He knew music. He made people laugh. He was popular. Everybody knew him. They gravitated to him. So as a younger brother, 4 years behind him, I'm looking at him like I want to be him. You know what I mean? And he was very special to me. So when we actually moved back, and I'm here now in my home place. The court had deteriorated quite a bit where we stayed on it. So we did some work to it, and kept working, and then I came up with the idea this year that I wanted to paint it, like a court, like that you see.
Did you do that yourself?
I did.
Wow, that's
I
really impressive.
found some concrete paint here, and I started out, and I just started, and then I kept going, and then I said, well, I'm gonna add some border, and then I'm gonna put his name and call it his court, because that's where I learned. I mean, I learned all my guard skills were because he was 6'6" and I was still 5'10".
Yeah.
So when I drove to the basket and he blocked my shot, I really want to hear that.
Yeah.
But I miss him, Brian. I've lost my my grandparents and my parents, and that's devastating.
Yeah.
No doubt. But your sibling, you just think they're always going to be there.
Yeah.
So when he passed in 2013, it was probably still one of the hardest things that I've ever had to deal with.
And I think one of those things that, again, it's one of those lessons that it's just lessons in resilience. You still got to get up each day and try to just, especially when you're working with kids. I mean, you could be going through all this stuff in your personal life, and then you have to go in and somebody said this quote. His name is Bob Aker. He said, to educators, to coaches, on your worst day, you are some child's best hope.
Yeah. When it's funny you say that, but many times I'll tell kids, I said, there are moments when I come here and I've had things happen to me, divorce, death in the family, financial issues, and they're devastating things. And while I'm riding to work and I'm listening to my music, I'm going through it.
Yeah.
But get into school, they would never know.
Yeah.
And I said, the smile comes on.
Yeah.
With eyes, and we just kind of start, and they don't know that. And I try to teach them that, we're not perfect. We have things happen to us, but we have to handle that, and we have to be professional, and we've got to come to work and do our job.
And for me, it all goes back to basketball, Greg, because if you're going through stuff and you come to practice, does the coach want to hear that? The coach wants to say they might empathize, but they say once we step between these four lines, we got a job to do because we're counting on you, Greg. We're counting on you, Brian.
Right. So and that's what you do. You go to work, and on that. Sometimes, I guess you could call it a facade because you're hurting.
Yeah.
Because I've been hurting, and it's funny because the kids, they know when things happen.
Yep.
Might miss work, and they'll say, "Where's Mr. Bozman at?" Well, his brother passed away, and you'll get a big card on your desk, and the whole student body signed it, and you're just, but part of that is, they know you care about them. They love them, and in return, a lot of times they'll love you too.
Yeah. Tell me about being an athletic director, because that you got to juggle a lot of balls, a lot of sports.
And when I first started that, I was at Chrisville, and I had that success with the girls basketball program,
Right.
and I was by the superintendent and assistant superintendent to go to Washington and coach Washington's boys team that had some rough times and
Right.
become a director. And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. I was fortunate again, like Mr. Phil Rayfield guided me through coaching, working under him.
Yeah.
I went to Mr. Tim Talls, who was the AD at Chrisville, and he was my go-to guy. Thank God for him, because I could call him, and even now I call Dave Bird at Pocomoke, Stosh
Yep.
at Y.
Yep.
I'm not perfect, what I mean? So if I've got a question and I think I'm getting ready to do something that I shouldn't be doing, those guys, Andy Hall at Parkside, they're all. So it can be tough sometimes. I mean, you got to balance, and you got to show fairness to every program also.
Yeah. I think one of the things I heard you say is you aren't afraid to reach out. And I think, again, being transparent and modeling what you want from people who are watching you is critically important. And so if I'm watching this and I'm an athletic director, or I'm a teacher, or I'm in any profession, and I hear Greg Bozman, who has, done a lot of great things, say, I don't know I don't know everything. I reach out and ask people, then I can say, I can do that too.
Right.
Yeah, because
You,
I think we've created this system, or this thinking that everybody is perfect, and nobody is perfect, and sometimes these facades hurt people because they think that they have to live up to some unrealistic expectation.
yeah, we had four gentlemen come to the school today. Andre Collins actually organized it, and I was like, see, and two of them I coached, so I'm much older than them,
Right.
but very successful, and they were talking about how they did it. And I'm 59 years old. I'm sitting in, and I'm learning from them.
Sure.
So you don't stop learning. You never stop learning. And I think sometimes, like you said, people think that if you're a principal, or you're
Yeah.
a big time doctor or a lawyer, that you know everything, and everybody's got to be that way. I got to be perfect. Well, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
We learn it.
Yeah.
I'm learning from you, because you're sharing things with me as we talk, and you have to absorb that,
Yeah.
to grow.
I think what you just said is exactly right. We learn from each other, and I just there's an old African proverb that my wife used to have on our wall, and I said it at my dad's funeral, and it goes, "As I go, I am wearing you," and it means, like, anybody who I have touched or who has influenced me, I am putting them on my back. I'm putting Greg Bozman on my back tonight. So where I go, from the rest of my life, there's pieces of you that I'm wearing because I'm going to use your experience, your story, to help me get through things or help me navigate things. So I think we all should be wearing each other, the good pieces, even the challenging pieces, because that helps us, when we face those challenges.
And that goes back to being blessed to we've been around in our lives
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
parents, coaches. I've had some people who, thank God I'm wearing them, because they've helped me through a lot of
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Hey, what makes me laugh, and it doesn't make me laugh, I'm really so impressed because my basketball days have long been over. I have had, hip replacement, two knee surgeries, but I will see your post in the morning where you are shooting in the morning before you go to the school or at school, and you're just firing them up. How many shots are you getting up in the morning?
Used to be 3 to 5. It's a little less than that now because
Oh
of
my
my.
goodness.
But it's that chip, you know,
Yeah.
there that still got to prove to these people that maybe the Greg Bozman, the one game where you showed me the clipping where I only had 4 points. That's not a Division
No,
One.
the clip I showed you had 19 points, and you all kicked our butt.
But that's how my high school career went. So I wanted to prove that, and still want to prove to people, hold on now. I might not have been the best high school player, but I became a very, very, very good player.
Yeah. I think we all, as former athletes, have this little chip,
Yeah.
because there's always something in the back of our head. Me, it's always, again, I don't dwell on it, but it's still there. that double overtime state championship loss that we absorbed in my senior year. And so those kind of things are always in the back. So it's like, okay, when I'm coming up against a challenge, how do I beat this? How do I beat this the next time?
Yeah. You were part of that chip, you know what I mean? Because I'm gonna call it like it is. When I'm playing high school basketball was around the same time you were, and you were the phenom. You were a freshman starter, sophomore star, junior, senior star. You're getting scholarship offers and the talk of Salisbury. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna show, I
You know,
prove
it's what's funny,
that.
Greg, I'm really being honest. I don't I remember part of my 4 years. I don't remember a lot of games. I mean, if I look at a stat sheet, I'll remember some games. Um, but I never saw myself that way. Like people tell me that's the way they saw me, but I never saw myself that way.
You're you're very humble. You know what I mean? You were different because there were a lot of guys that were good and they let you know they were good. You were a little different. You just went out there and played and you were, like I said, we all had respect for you and you were a household name.
Yeah,
On
I just remember, seeing you play, and then when you went over to Christopher, I'm like, God, that guy can shoot. How are we gonna beat them? And so I'm always thinking like, you guys are better than me. Like truly, I'm like, how are we gonna beat them with the weapons they have?
right.
And so I mean, again, I don't want to be arrogantly humble because I know I was pretty good, but on the other hand, I was like, I don't, I just didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. And I guess I was just, which I show by still getting up in the mornings. I just
Yeah.
something to prove. You know what I mean? I got to prove, and I still feel like it sometimes when they'll talk about different players, and I'm just like, and I say, "Boz, look, come on now, you're 59 years old. It's over."
Yeah.
So that competitive spirit always churns, though. I think you
Yeah.
just got to use it in different areas now.
Yeah. Well, before we close, because I do appreciate you coming on. This has been wonderful, and again, it's taken. And I'm trying to think when we first probably met. It has to be 43 years ago, 44 years ago.
Go back to that Salvation Army. It's probably a little longer than that.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably
yeah,
12, 13 years old when you were
yeah. So,
probably
yeah,
12. So
yeah.
that's been a long time, you
And
know.
so this is the first time we've actually sat down and have a conversation. So when I come down to the Eastern Shore, we have to actually go and sit down
Oh,
and
absolutely.
have some dinner and just really kind of have another conversation and chat it up because this has been wonderful. And Greg, seriously, when I think of people from the Eastern Shore who have created a legacy and created um, just a way of a path for people, a path for young men, young women on how to live their lives. And again, we're going to have challenges. We're going to go through things. But how do you respond? How do you bounce back? And how do you continue to, within those storms, continue to help other people? That's you. That's you,
Well,
my friend.
I appreciate it. I feel like that's been my calling, to try to help people, and it's so fulfilling. All the basketball things aside, and we both had a lot of great accomplishments, and we could brag a little bit about how our careers were and where we played, but the most important thing to me is if I help somebody. You
Yeah.
know, you notice on Facebook, I don't get into negative posts. I don't get
Right.
into.
Yeah.
I stay positive because I feel like that's what people need. You need positive people in your life,
Yeah.
and if I've helped one person, I think Muhammad Ali said it. I don't know exactly how the quote goes, but I think he said if he's helped one person in his life, then his life has been worth living. So that's kind of what I stand by.
Yeah. And he also said, if I'm the same person at 50 that I was at 20, then I've wasted my life.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. I'm
So,
sorry that I'm not that I've learned and I've grown. So,
yeah, I
hey,
think that's
hey, you, we haven't talked like you said. This is the most we've ever talked, but it's almost like we're best friends.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I texted you one time, and I said I felt like I've known you, although we've known each other our whole lives. We haven't known each other, but I feel like I've known you, and like we've just always talked like this.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful. I mean, you can talk about what I've done. You've done some wonderful things also. So,
Well,
I
I'm wearing a lot of people, Greg. I'm wearing a lot of people.
the same thing, and we'll continue to do that.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on a conversation with Brian, and we'll talk to you very soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, Greg.